Hi, I'm Miss Haley with the Huntsville-Madison County Public Library, and today I'm going to show you how to make an animal ear headband. So for this activity, you will need a hot glue gun. This is just a low temp with some glue sticks. You'll need a ruler, a pencil, a pen or Sharpie, doesn't matter which, some scissors. I have two pairs. One is for paper and one is for fabric, but you can just use one. You don't have to have two. A headband. This is a really cheap, I think it was $1, plastic headband that's about a 1/4 inch thick. It's a very small headband. Almost any headband will do, but you don't want a super thick one. And I like the plastic ones because they have the little grips. Then you are going to need 2 different colors of felt depending on what type of animal ear you want to do. So I'm doing a wolf ear today. So I've got gray fabric for my wolf ear, and I've got this sort of really pale pink for the inner ear. And these are just some scraps left over from something else. That's why they're cut into little heart shapes. So depending on the kind of animal ear you want, you might have different colors than I have here. You could do, also if you have a wolf ear, if you don't have this off pink color, it's kind of like a white pink, you could just use white. If you wanted to do a cat ear, you could do whatever color cat you really want. And you could do like a creamy yellow for the inner ear. Your colors are really up to you. You also do not have to do a pointy ear. You need a piece of cardstock. I prefer cardstock for this because we're going to make our own template today. It is going to look like these, but I'm going to show you guys how to make one of these. And you can either do a rounded one or a pointed one. So if you wanted to do like a bear ear, or I think lions actually have rounded ears, you can do that as well. I'm going to show you guys how to do the pointed ear, but it's the exact same process. You just round it instead of drawing a triangle. So super easy. So I'm going to show you right here how to make this ear, and we're going to use our ruler to do it. So our tab is just shy of 1.5 inches. It's actually 1 1/4. And our ear piece is actually, let's see, from that tab, it's 3 inches. That's what I thought. And then our inner ear is 2. So what we're going to do is we are going to, so we have 1 1/4 and 3 inches. So together that makes 4 1/4. Woo! My math skills were not with me for a second there. So I'm going to, on this piece of paper, I'm just going to draw a line right up here. And this is something that I printed. I had made this template earlier in the past, and so I have prints of these, but I don't have a way of getting them to you today. So I'm just going to show you how I drew it. And that will let you draw your own ear shape too. So you might want a slightly more round or a slightly pointier ear, and this lets you decide. So I just drew a line at the top. It's a little ways down from the edge of my paper, and that's to give us some wiggle room there. And then from that line, I'm going to measure let's see, I said 3 inches, 1 1/4, so 4 1/4 inches, and make a mark. And I'm going to come up here. I'm going to flip my ruler around so I can see better. And come up here and do the same thing. Then I'm going to connect those 2 lines. Like that. So this is the space that we have to make our tab in our ear. And then this is the space that we're going to make our inner ear. And just hold that up to you so you can see those lines better. So next, I'm going to measure 1 1/4 inches up from this bottom line. I'm going to line up the bottom of my ruler with that bottom line and do 1 1/4 here. And 1 1/4 here. And then I'm going to draw another line between those. I'm going to connect those 2 lines. It doesn't have to be perfect. That's definitely not straight, so it's a good thing it doesn't have to be perfect. Now I'm going to draw from this bottom line. So here's what we have. So we have a line here, 3 inches, this line, 1 1/4 inches, this line, and then from this bottom line, I'm going to do another one that's 2 inches down. And this is just making our top marks. This is giving us the space that we know we need to work between. So I'm going to put my ruler here, and I'm just lining up one of the marks. In this case, it happens to be the 8-inch mark. It doesn't really matter as long as you do 2 inches. So I'm going to go 2 inches and make a mark. 2 inches, make a mark. I'm going to try to get it straight this time. See how that goes. All right. So in this top space, we're going to draw our ear, and we're going to draw our tab. My tab is about, how wide did I make that? 2.5 inches wide. So I'm going to just go ahead and draw in my tab. So here and here, roughly in the middle of my space. It'll kind of depend on the space you're working with. I'm working in a weird space since I'm trying to do it to the side of these. You'll probably have a lot more room. So just in the middle of your lines, you want a 2.5 inch wide tab. So it's 1 1/4 here. I'll go ahead and write that in. 1 1/4 here, and it's 2 inches here. So on this, I'm going to draw my triangle shape. I want it to overlap the edges of the tab. So the tab ends here and here. I want my ear to kind of come off to the sides a little bit. So it doesn't super matter where. I'm just going to put 2 marks to either side, and we're going to go with it. So I'm going to start in about the middle of the tab, which would be about right here, and I'm going to draw a slightly rounded triangle down to that point. And I'm going to do the same thing from here, except I'm going to go up to there. And there's my ear. I'm going to echo that same shape down here. You want it to be, it can be about the width of your tab, or it could be slightly smaller. It doesn't really super matter. Put my point there. So it's the same shape, just a slightly rounded triangle. And that'll be our inner ear. So we've got our outer ear, our inner ear, and our tab. Like that. So when you cut out this template, you can, if you want to, this is why you have a Sharpie, you can go over that with a Sharpie or a pen to make those lines more clear. I'm not going to bother with that. I think the pencil marks are pretty clear, but if you need one, you can have it for that. You might also need it for tracing. And when you're going to trace your template, I recommend using the fine tip if you can. It just kind of depends on what's going to work with your felt, and we'll get to that in a minute. So I'm going to cut this out. And when I do, I'm going to cut off my inner ear. So I'm just going to cut that off from the tab. So I'm going to cut along that line where the inner ear meets the tab so that I have an inner ear now, and then I have the tab and the outer ear. So I'm going to finish cutting out my inner ear template. That up. I definitely didn't stay in the line there. So there's my inner ear, and we can set those scraps aside. So when you cut out your outer ear, you're going to leave the tab on it because we want the outer ear with the tab connected. So even though they're separated on our template, we're going to leave them connected. So cut that out. Again, just leaving your tab connected to that outer ear. Like that. So you should have this weird little hat shape. Okay, so we're going to set this aside. If you had wanted to do the round ear instead of that triangle ear shape that I just did, all you have to do is do a circle. That's all you got to do. I'm going to set that aside, and now we are going to trace it onto our felt. So if you've got a piece of felt, make sure you take off whatever stickers on the back. There will be some sort of sticker, a price tag, something. It almost always is one, unless it came from a big set. But make sure you take it off, and when you do, make sure you peel it up carefully. It can stretch your felt in a weird way, and we don't want that to happen. And we also don't want to like cut through it and have it still attached to our piece. That's very hard to get off. So I'm going to trace my ear on here twice. If, like mine, yours didn't come out perfectly symmetrical, mine kind of leans to the right a little bit. So I'm going to trace it once, face up, and the other time face out. That way I'll have two ears that go either direction. Arguably, you could just flip one ear over, but there are going to be some pin marks or pencil marks on one side of our felt. And we want to make sure that's the side that faces backwards because we may not be able to cut all those off. So depending on your felt color, what you're going to want to do is start tracing it. We're going to see if I can trace it with a pencil onto here, and I can. My pencil traced really well onto there. If your pencil doesn't work or you can't see it, say you're working with a black fabric, that's where the Sharpie comes in, or a felt tip pen. I would use the skinny end of the Sharpie if you have one. If you don't, no big deal. Just slightly go over your template. Draw like half on your template, half off. That way you're not getting a super thick line. But black Sharpie, believe it or not, usually shows up on black felt because there's slightly different shades of black, and the black felt tends not to be as concentrated. So usually it's hard to see, but you can see black. You might also be able to see a pencil on black fabric because it's sort of a silvery color. And if all else fails, you can use chalk. Chalk will show up. So we are going to finish tracing this guy. And we're going to trace him twice. And I'm lining it up so that he's big enough to do this. There's not a lot of space here between them. Otherwise, I would try to conserve felt. But I'm lining it up so that the base of my tab, the flat end of that tab, is at the flat end of my felt, because that's just a little bit less cutting that I have to do. So I'm tracing it on here, and then we're going to cut that out. While you're doing this, make sure your glue gun is already plugged in so it can be heating up, it can be warming up, it can take a little time. So just make sure you're already kind of doing that while we are doing the rest of our project. So I'm going to cut these out. I'm actually going to kind of cut them out loosely and set that big piece of felt aside and then cut them out. I like to do that rather than just cutting them out straight from the big piece, because then you have that huge piece of felt just flapping next to you, and it can make it harder to cut out, and you can make more mistakes that way. So I'm going to cut this out. I'm going to do my best to cut off the drawing part. I don't really want that on there, so rather than cutting right on it, I'm cutting just to one side, but I'm not sure how well that shows up on the camera. There's a little bit right there. So if some of it shows through, that's fine. It's not the end of the world. And when I set this down, I'm going to set it down so that I know which side was the one I drew on. Just in case any of it's showing through, I can make sure it lines up on the back. So I'm going to set it down so that side that I drew on is face down. So that's one ear cut out, and I'm going to do this next one. When you are cutting felt, or any thick fabric really, or anytime you're having trouble cutting, it's always better to cut down here in the scissors. So you see I'm cutting right here. I'm not using the tips of my scissors. The tips of your scissors are not super great for cutting. So if you're struggling with your cutting, try that. Try changing that up. A lot of times that's what's happening. All right, so we're going to set that aside for now, and we are going to do our inner ear. Hopefully that fits on my little pieces. I wanted to use up some scrap felt. Oh, good, it does. So I'm going to, again, just use my pencil. I'm positive it'll show up on this light colored fabric to trace my inner ear. You guys do not have to use this small of a piece of felt if you don't want to. If you have like a sheet, that's fine. I would just keep it to one side. Don't trace it smack in the middle of your sheet. Make sure you're going to one side. That way you have felt left over for another project if you want. And we're going to cut this out as well. So I'm going to move that over there into my scrap pile. Okay, so now we have our inner ears too. I'm going to again lay those so that the side I traced on is face down. So you've got all these scraps. With your bigger scraps, with a really small scrap like that, I would just get rid of that. But with these small scraps, if you do a lot of felt projects, if you make any sort of like animals out of felt or any felties, these little scraps can be great for some of the detail work. So I always save my scraps, but that's up to you guys. We are going to glue now our ears, our inner ears, down onto our outer ears. So we're just going to glue it down to the front. I'm positioning them in advance so I kind of know where I want them. And we want them a little up. So don't line them up here, because if you do, you're going to have all this ear. And I want a more even look. But if you like that, if you like it here, and you like all this around it, that's fine too. It is up to you. They're your animal ears. You're presumably going to be the one wearing them. The only thing you don't want to do is go any lower than the tab. So imagine there's a line here at the base of our ear. You don't want to go below that, because this tab is how we're going to attach it to the headband. So if you go past that point, it's going to look a little weird. It's going to get caught up in that. So I'm going to put glue all along the back outline of my inner ear. And then I'm going to set that guy back down. And press a little bit and then just let it dry. You don't have to really hold this down. It will adhere pretty well just on its own. But I do press it first. All right. Same thing. If you have, I'm not sure how well this shows up on the camera, but a little glue streamer here, just wait until it's a little bit dry and then pull it off. It pulls right off, but you want to wait until it's just a smidge dry. If you're doing it while it's still wet, you're just going to pull and pull and pull and pull, and that glue is going to keep coming. So we have our two ears. Now it is time to attach them to the headband. So what you're going to do is you're going to fold up. Well, first decide where you want them. You kind of want them to the side. You might want them on the top, but you're going to want them slightly to the side. I like to have about a 1-inch gap between on top. But we are going to fold it up a little so that the flap is up, and we're going to put some glue right, let me think about this. How do I want this to sit on there? Yep, okay. So we're going to put the glue right along here on the fold, but only on the part that is the tab. So right along there, and then I'm going to glue it down to the top of my headband. And I'm going to hold it like that. I'm holding the flap up too. I'm not letting it flap down all the way, because if you do, it might accidentally flip around into that glue. So hold it up and just kind of press it down. And you might get a little glue on you. Okay. So that's one ear. So it should be kind of just flapping there right now on your headband. So now we're going to put glue along the part where the tab's going to touch right here on the inside of your headband. So between those teeth on the headband, we're just going to put some glue. You can try not to go over, especially on this inner part, because if you do, it might get in your hair. So we're going to pull really tight and then press down on that until it is glued. And I'm allowing a little, I'm pressing enough that some of the texture is coming through the felt a little bit, but we don't want to like poke a hole or anything. Okay. So now we need to get it to stand up. We're going to glue this tab to the back of our ear, but we're going to hold the ear into position while we do. It'll help hold it into a stiff position. So we're going to put glue right here along the back of the ear and then along the top of that tab. And we are going to hold it in the upright position. Ow. And burn ourselves maybe a little bit. But this is going to help hold it up. And I'm just kind of pressing back and forth until it feels set, until it feels dry. So the issue here, though, is the only thing holding it in this upright position is the glue and the fact that I folded it a little. So eventually, as that relaxes, it's going to flop back down and be sideways. So what we want to do is we want to take these two ear corners. We're going to put a little dot right there on the front and a little dot right there on the front, and we're going to pinch them down like that. So again, that'll be a little dot right there and a little dot right there, and then we're going to pinch them down. So, whoop, whoop. And we're going to pinch it out, 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 downward. We're going to hold until it's set, and we're going to let that dry before we put on our second one. All right, so this should be dry. I'm going to pull off any strings I have, any streamers. And that is one of our ears. So we're going to do our next one. If it helps you to find the halfway point, you can make a little mark there with some chalk or a little piece of tape. I just eyeball it, but if you're really concerned about getting them centered, you can do that. So we're going to repeat the same process. So I'm going to fold the tab up, and I'm going to put glue along the fold, only along the part where the tab is. Ooh, almost time for more glue. And I'm going to make sure when I put it down that I'm hopefully putting them down symmetrically. So I'm going to hold that down, press, press, press until I feel like that's set. Pop another glue stick in my glue gun here. And then we're going to come to the back side and put glue right along the inside of that headband. And we're going to fold this over, and we're folding it nice and tightly. We're making sure we're not loose along the fold line here. And we're pressing that down. Then we're going to set it down so that the ear is face down, but that will let it sit in the position more that we're going to want it. So I'm going to put some glue along the base of the ear where the tab is going to join, and then along the top of the tab. And then I'm going to press that down onto my ear. And then I'm going to come around, I'm going to lift it up, and I'm going to squeeze it together. But I'm holding it again in that upright position that I want to keep it at. Once that feels a little more set, I'm going to put a dot of glue right here on the front corner and a dot of glue right here on the front corner. And I'm going to fold those down and forward. And we have an animal ear headband. And these are wolf ears. So if you guys can see it, I have a little bit of that tab peeking off here. I could either glue that down. If you want, you just add a little glue. You could also trim it off. I'm going to glue it down a little bit more. So I'm just going to squeeze a little glue under there and then press it down into the ear. I'm doing that rather than trimming because when you trim, you are always at risk of accidentally cutting something off your ear that you don't want to. But you can trim if you want to. Say you had a really big flap and you couldn't just press it down. You can trim it. All right, and there is our animal ear headband. I hope you guys have fun with this. I would love to see what kinds of animals you do. Every time I do this craft in person, everyone has a slightly different animal that they want to do, and I think that's really cool. So I would love to see what you guys make, and you can send those to us on our Facebook, which is Huntsville Madison County Public Library. Thank you.